Hello and welcome to Talking Treasures, a CTV Perth production. Today we're coming to you from the Kalamunda Hotel in Kalamunda. We have an exciting episode for you with lots of treasures that our home viewers have bought in. We have Matt Donnelly to look at collectibles, Jilly Hayes to look at jewellery and silverware, Grant Stone will have a play with toys and books, and John Stringer will look at our fine arts. So let's go and have a look and see what our experts are up to.
Hi, Maya.
Hello Grant, how are you today?
Doing well, thanks.
Oh, excellent. What have you brought in for us?
This is a collection of books, as you can see, that look tired, worn out, and should be given to an op shop. In fact, most of them came from there. And the reason why I've retrieved them and the reason why I think they make a really interesting collection is that all of these have come from circulating libraries or libraries of one sort that were commercial at the time when the books were bought by these particular libraries. They're not actually the sort of books that most people would even notice, let alone collect. And yet when you put them together, there's a rich history of the way in which books work their way into a culture that these books will tell you. Not only the pace down, which is this label that's on the front here, this pace down label is the label of the library that the books belong to. So this is Foy's Lending Library, and you might find Bowen's Book Club, which was also a lending library. These were two major department stores in Western Australia.
How long ago?
Well, Bowen's hadn't gone until the 1970s. Foy's was a little earlier than that. In fact, Foy's went through a number of avatars as various bits and people bought it out, and eventually it became David Jones in Western Australia.
Oh, right.
But this big department store ran between Hay Street in Perth and St George's Terrace, and Bowen's ran between, of course, Murray Street and Wellington Street. They're very big department stores that covered whole blocks. The thing about these libraries is that these existed before there were public libraries for people to go and get their books from. The public library system in Western Australia didn't get underway until the early 1950s. There were libraries that you could actually join where you could get your reading literature from free, like the Mechanics Institutes or the Guild libraries. But in the main, if you wanted to read a book, you actually had to join a library, pay a bit of money, and then for maybe a shilling or sixpence every week, you could exchange a certain number of books. And these were circulating libraries. Obviously, the people selling books thought that this was a way to get a bit of money on the side. They could take some of the books that they had for sale, put them in a circulating library, and get maybe more money back if the book was exceedingly popular, like the latest novel or whatever the case might be. So department stores started circulating libraries as a means of exploiting the very books that they were selling commercially. And once the books had been used a little, they could sell them on to people as kind of second-hand books. So the department store libraries were also a point of new book sales and a point of second-hand book sales. And when they were sold for second-hand, of course, they went out into the public with the labels stuck on the front. And we have these circulating library copies now, which are in the op shops and the market stalls around all over Australia, in fact.
So you're holding a piece of WA history right
Indeed,
here?
I am. In fact, for my money, some of these libraries that were existing in the suburbs are even more interesting than the big department store libraries, which people do know about. Here's Eddie's library, which was in one of the suburbs, and Lindor's is another suburban circulating library. The people that made these circulating libraries didn't have big department stores. So you ask yourself, where was their stock of books? Yes, I heard you ask that question. I can see it in your eyes,
where
Miley.
was your stock of books?
Absolutely. And they had them in the back of vans. So these guys would load up a van full of books, put their labels on the front of the books themselves, and then drive around to their customers and go door to door, exchanging library books for maybe sixpence, a shilling a book as the case might be. And people would have their reading on a regular basis from the library that drove up to their door. And it's these circulating libraries in vans that largely the public library system all over Australia replaced during the 1950s.
So it's kind of like an old-fashioned video shop in a way, except for going door to door, of course.
Well, exactly. And there was even versions of video stores that went door to door in the very early stages of the video industry. So few machines, such expensive technology will bring the software to you. And that really is a repeat of what the circulating libraries had done before. Where did this system come from? Where did this invention come from? It largely came out of the UK in the 19th century, and I've got one example of a book. It's the remainder of a book, you might say. It says, "Don't throw it out. Please give this cover to Grant." Once we've got rid of the book out of the library.
Yeah, I've read that one. That was very interesting.
No, it wasn't. But it's the pace down that attracted me. Moody's was what was called the queen of the circulating libraries in London. And Moody's had almost a palace built in London where the carriages would come in and the gentle people would alight out of the carriage. They would go into Moody's, they would get their books. The driver would come back after having done a lap of the block and pick them up again in the carriage. So this is a
very
genteel...
upper class.
Well, exactly.
Yes.
Well, they were the people who could read, and they're the people who could afford to read. And Moody's...
Therefore, the service, yes.
Absolutely. Moody's, throughout the latter part of the 19th century and the very early part of the 20th century, up until about the 1920s, was an institution of great note in London because it enabled people to read.
Cool. Thank you very much for that, Grant.
You are
very
welcome, Miley.
interesting piece of history there.
Thank you.
I'm Matt Donnelly. I'm joined here by Kate, who's brought along some interesting silver items. Whereabouts did these come by, Kate?
From my neighbour too.
Yeah, okay. They're very nice. These are actually all silver plated, so they're not the genuine silver. Otherwise they'd be worth, well into the thousands. But nevertheless, they're a very good quality and a very pretty tea and coffee set. We go with the sugar bowl, the creamer, teapot, coffee pot and the milk jug. So very nice to have the lot, especially with the tray as well. And they would probably date from about 1900 to 1910, something like that. Still silver plated, but they're very much like Art Nouveau sort of style. Yeah, lovely patterning. The value of a set like that with the tray complete would probably be around about $400 or $500. If it was silver, it'd be more like $3,000 or $4,000. But being silver plate, they're a little bit less, expensive. Other little interesting items I noticed here is a little set of tongs. What were they used for? Sugar, picking up the little sugar cubes. Yeah, pickles and things. We normally call them a pickle fork, but yeah, interesting little tongs there. They stay nice to keep with them. What used to happen with this is they used to wear these around their necks as a wine sampler.
Did they?
Yeah, and the waiter would come along and fill some wine into these. They would circulate it.
That's my mistake. I
Taste them.
It was an extra.
Yeah, no, they're actually a little wine sampler, and definitely French. And a little item like this at auction would probably bring $200 or $300, even though it's silver plate. But they're very desirable as a collectible. A very nice little item, that, and quite unique on its own. So certainly not an ashtray.
Better look after that.
You better look after that one, yeah. This one here is like a hand-beaten, hand-worked silver tray. It's made in Mexico, where a lot of the Mexicans made silver, and as we said before, labour's very cheap. Very good detail and very good shape and quality. Value-wise, probably round about the couple of $100 marks. Has a small bit of a dent in here, which is not helping the value. But other than that, it is, quite
It's survived quite a lot.
Yeah, it has. It's probably been through a war or so. So good maker's mark to the back with the Mexican, but a nice little piece there. So once again, we have quite an interesting collection of certainly very pretty in the Art Nouveau, the tea set. Yeah. So, and it's obviously hard to keep clean, but keeping it clean and having it looking nice around the home.
That's another thing.
We'll talk to your husband about that, eh?
No, I don't think so.
No? Not a good cleaner? No, we'll have to change that
That's why
now.
it sits in a cupboard. It's not out.
Yeah, that's right. Well, unfortunately, that's some of the problem with these type of things, why they're not bringing as much money now as people aren't using them. But nevertheless, a pretty set like this should be on display, because very rarely you find a nice Art Nouveau pattern like that. And the detail and even the legs and all the tulips, they're just fascinating. It'll attract a lot of buyers.
I had it very shiny, but it doesn't take long to...
No, they tarnish very quickly, but they don't take a lot of work polishing them up either. But yeah, we thank you once again for bringing them in. They're very interesting items found at Kalamunda Hotel.
This is Talking Treasures, a CTV Perth production, and I'm here with Gilly Hayes from Hayes Auctioneers, the head expert, is it there?
I just value things and so forth. Yes,
Oh.
general factotum, I think.
Well, what have you got for us?
Today I brought it looks like a perfectly ordinary soup ladle, and to all intents and purposes, that's exactly what it is. But it has two things going for it. One is that it's nice and early. It was made in 1801. There was a lot less silver made in the provinces in England, and when it becomes more collectible, really, if it comes from Edinburgh or Dublin or one of the.
Is that because of the lack of silver at the time?
It
or-
was. There was just a great deal more being done in London,
Yeah.
London and Birmingham, the main centres in England, and there are specific collectors of the Edinburgh hallmark or the Dublin or Irish halls and so forth. This is a nice, lovely, sort of sturdy-looking ladle, a nice example, and useful. You know, it's something that everybody can use.
And you've got your hallmarks on the back here.
Hallmarks on the back, yes. Now, these are slightly different from the ones that we saw on the English, insofar as they have, the first of them is a three-turreted castle, which denotes that it's Edinburgh.
Mm-hmm.
The thistle is a Scottish emblem. That's the date letter there, and the fact that duty has been paid on it. I'm sure the Scottish didn't like paying duty to His Majesty, because the Scots don't like the English very
No,
much.
especially not
And
at that time.
They wouldn't have been terribly pleased about that. And this little mark down here is the maker's mark. But the one on the end here, AE, I wasn't able to find out who AE was, but it will be one of the silversmiths working at that time in Edinburgh. It's a beautiful set of marks. It's everything you'd expect in a nice set of hallmarks on a piece of silver. So you've got a lovely functional piece, nice quality, nice condition, no dents, and a jolly good set of hallmarks. At auction, one would expect to pay around the $400 for such a thing, but probably rather more than that in a shop.
So this is quite a collector's item, or
It's a collectible. It's collectible because of its
Yeah.
where it's come from, and also because, of course, it's useful. I once had a client who had a great big one of these, and it had a big dent in the back, and I asked her about the dent, and she said, "Oh, it was my mother's. She used it for braining rats, so she used to use it for clouting."
oh, that's got to take
Yes.
some of the value off
I know,
it.
somehow it loses its lustre, doesn't it?
Oh,
Never mind.
that's lovely. Thank you very much, Gilly.
My pleasure.
Stay tuned to Talking Treasures, a CTV Perth production. We're at the lovely Kalamunda Hotel in the hills. We'll be back after the break with some more exciting treasures.